Hi children, in this video I will be explaining the responses of organisms to various abiotic stresses in the lesson Organisms and Population. There are various abiotic factors influencing the distribution of organisms in an environment. They are namely water to temperature, light and salinity or salt content. These are the four major abiotic factors influencing the distribution of organisms, both plants and animals, on the earth's surface. And these abiotic factors are not uniform or not constant. They vary from environment to environment and they show drastic variations. And in certain environments they are very stressful, that is they are very drastic in the sense they show, in the case of water it can show water stress, in the case of temperature it can be extreme temperature. So these various factors are not at all favorable, but the organisms during the course of evolution has coped to these various factors in the environment. Some of the organisms during the course of evolution has coped to these environmental stresses by maintaining a constant internal environment. Here internal environment means internal temperature and body, that is the blood osmolarity or blood water salt concentration. So by maintaining a constant body temperature and constant body osmolarity constant, they are able to thrive in any environment. That property of an organism to maintain a constant body temperature and constant fluid osmolarity is known as homeostasis. In short, we can say constant internal environment. And to specify the internal environment, it is the body temperature and the body fluid osmolarity, so which is the blood. Osmolarity means salt water concentration. So these organisms have this ability to maintain a constant internal environment compared to the external environment. Then external environment may have fluctuation. It may be the temperature may be too high or too low. Whatever the temperature outside, the body temperature of these organisms are constant. Example is us, man. What is our body temperature? 37 degrees Celsius. So whether we go to the Sahara desert or go to the Antarctic region where it's very cold, or the Sahara desert which is extremely hot, our body is not, temperature is not going to fluctuate. We maintain a steady body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. So such an ability to maintain a constant internal environment is known as homeostasis. And the organisms, the category or the class of organisms that possess homeostasis are called regulators. So these have the ability, the regulators have the ability to maintain constant temperature. They have this ability, whereas and that ability to maintain a constant internal environment is called homeostasis. So I give a tick against homeostasis. Whereas the second category of organisms that lack the ability to maintain a constant body temperature or body osmolarity are called conformers. So they lack this ability. They lack the ability of homeostasis. So basically the difference between a regulator and a conformer is homeostasis. Regulators have the ability of homeostasis, whereas conformers do not have this ability called homeostasis. Now we have a third category in between regulators and conformers. They are called the partial regulators. As the name suggests, they regulate up to a certain limit, beyond which they simply conform. So from the very name you can get the answer. because it is called partial regulators. First you give importance for regulation. So they regulate to a certain extent, after which they simply conform. Now these three categories of organisms are going to be depicted on the graph. See, this is a graph depicting the external level on the x-axis. So the external level, for example, let us take temperature. Internal level of the body temperature on the y-axis. So on the y-axis it is indicating the body temperature, on x-axis it is indicating the environmental temperature. Now I am going to plot the graph for regulators, regulators like us, man. So our body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. See, our body temperature, I am drawing it against 37 degrees Celsius, and as the temperature of the external environment is increasing, see, the body temperature is maintained constant 37. See, I am scribbling, it's only 37. It's not going above or below. So that is indicating regulators. Now talking about conformers. See, as the external temperature increases, the body temperature also increases. See, so we get a graph which is a slanting line which is rising slowly. So why it's rising slowly, this line, this violet color line? As the temperature outside or in the ambient medium is increasing, the body temperature also increases. So this is a graph depicting conformers. And as I told you, the third category of organisms are the partial regulators. They regulate up to a certain level. So till here they regulate, they maintain a constant temperature up to a certain level, but beyond which they simply conform. So that's the third category called the partial regulators. So this is a graph depicting regulators, conformers and partial regulators, whether they have the ability for homeostasis or not, and we have in the third category like a hybrid form showing a bit of the ability of homeostasis, after which they simply conform. So that's all about the categories or the main classification of organisms based on homeostasis. Now we can see how organisms cope to abiotic stresses. There are 4 strategies. The first strategy is the organism, they regulate. So one option is they regulate. If not regulate, they conform. Second strategy. Third strategy is they migrate, and fourth strategy, suspend. Now this we have already analyzed. The first and second strategy we have already analyzed when we dealt with homeostasis. So again reiterating the same portion, but we are going to analyze who are these regulators. Remember, in simple words, regulators includes the warm-blooded animals. So example of regulators are the warm-blooded animals, and we know which are the warm-blooded animals: mammals and birds. Whereas conformers are the cold-blooded animals. So it includes the other 3 classes: fish, amphibians and reptiles. So we have the 2 categories, and I have assigned the examples. And in simple words, which are the regulators? Warm-blooded mammals, warm-blooded animals, which includes the mammals and the birds, and cold-blooded animals comes under conformers, which includes fish, amphibians and reptiles. Then why is the name regulate? Regulate, we know the use of a regulator for fans and all. It fluctuates. Then here we are talking about homeostasis, and we are saying to maintain a constant body temperature, maintain a constant fluid osmolarity. And why is the term regulator given? So now here the relevance of the name regulate is going to come into play. Why it is given the name regulate? In order to cope with the environmental stress. For example, take our case. With our case as example, we can take the 2 very distinct seasons of our tropical region. I am not going to the temperate region, of our very region where we are experiencing. We have the summer, and you know how is our summer, very extreme summer, and we have the winter, which is cool, pretty cool. Okay. Now here our body is maintaining a constant body temperature. We are having the ability to for homeostasis, okay, 37 degrees Celsius. But how are we able to cope during summer and cope during winter? Clear? Something should accomplish our performance. For example, I have a beautiful analogy to say we perform well at a particular temperature, room temperature. But during summer or winter, to enhance our performance, we install something in our room. For example, in summer, we all have, by now, most of us have bought a AC. So this will accomplish our performance. We do well, just accomplishing our performance. Okay. Similarly, now that is not the case in ours. Just think of Switzerland or Norway or Canada. That's extremely cold, and there to accomplish their performance, too cold. So they feel like being always inside the house. So to accomplish them, make them agile, what they install heaters. So these installing heaters or AC is just to accomplish, to just make our performance more efficient. Similarly, we have something to make us work efficiently during summer and winter. In summer we sweat a lot. Okay, that is a mechanism to give us cooling. Just imagine if we didn't have sweat glands, what would have happened to us? We would have been like hot iron boxes or hot utensils. But because of these sweat glands, these secretions are released over our skin and it gives a cooling effect, an AC effect. Similarly, on the contradiction, during winter, what happens? We shiver. This is a measure or a strategy to generate heat. When we shiver, it is a blessing. A lot of heat is generated. So this is how it is regulated. Our temperature is regulated, but our temperature is constant, 37 degrees Celsius. But during summer we feel cool because of the sweating, and during winter we feel warm when we shiver because heat is generated. So this regulation is called thermoregulation, because our temperature is being regulated. Temperature means to feel accomplished. Okay, this is a physiological mean. Not, as I told you earlier, installing an AC or a heater is just an artificial means. This is physiological. Clear? So this is how thermoregulation is taking place in us. Similarly, osmoregulation is taking place. As I told you, what are osmolarity? It is the blood concentration of salt and water. Okay, there is a particular consistency of our blood. It should not be too thick or too thin. That means it cannot be concentrated with salt. It cannot be very diluted with water. There is a constancy maintained in the salt water concentration or the salt water balance. That is maintained with the help of the kidneys. So that's why the kidneys are called osmoregulators. We have a pair of kidney and they play a very, very important role. So again I am bringing the two seasons, summer, winter. Now the urine produced during summer, how is it? It is highly concentrated, and do you frequently urinate? No. So volume is also less. On the other hand, during winter, the volume, high volume of urine, and that too it's diluted urine, very diluted urine, and the frequent micturition or passage of urine. So this is the case during summer and winter, which is brought about by the kidney osmoregulation. That's how the the osmolarity of the blood is maintained. The salt water concentration is maintained. We have learnt in 11th standard how the water absorption and salt absorption is taking place at the loop of Henle, the ascending limb, descending limb, and the collecting tubule. For in this context only, you have to know that osmoregulation is accomplished with the help of the kidney. During summer, you can see, and winter, you can see the volume is not the same of the urine produced, it is different, and also the frequency of visiting the toilet also increases in winter. That is to maintain the constancy of the osmolarity in our blood. So this is what is happening in regulators. That's why it's getting the name regulator. As I've already told, warm-blooded are a good example for regulators. Warm-blooded animals can also be called by another term in terms of homeostasis, endotherms. So a new term in context to homeostasis, warm-blooded animals can be called as endotherms. On the same lines, cold-blooded animals can be called ectotherms. endotherms. And again I am reiterating the same meaning. They have the ability to maintain a constant body temperature and osmolarity, endotherms. That means in short we can say they have the ability for homeostasis, whereas ectotherms lack the ability of homeostasis. The meaning of that, their body temperature or osmolarity fluctuates along with the surrounding medium or according to the surrounding medium. So, I will just wind up the difference between regulators and conformers. Regulators, what should come to your mind? Warm-blooded animals, and conformers, cold-blooded animals. Another name for warm-blooded animals, endotherms, sorry, and the other name for cold-blooded animals are ectotherms. And what is the meaning of endotherm? They maintain an internal constant environment irrespective of the environment surrounding it, that is to specify constant temperature, constant osmolarity, whereas ectotherms lack this ability. Their body temperature and osmolarity fluctuates according to the environment, especially the fishes. They live in an ambient medium which can be very salty, then the body osmolarity, the fluid osmolarity also fluctuates. If they are living in a freshwater environment, again the osmolarity fluctuates. Whereas the terrestrial forms, it's with respect to the temperature. So whatever it is, give a specification, it's with respect to temperature and osmolarity. Then I told you why the name regulator is given to this category. The endotherms are given the name regulators because the kidneys are doing the osmoregulation and thermoregulation by sweating profusely or by shivering. How their performance or efficiency is improved by generation of heat or by a feeling of coolness with the help of sweat. That's why the name regulator is given. So that particular name regulator is just like the regulator of our fan, and that is being accomplished by physiological means. Now moving away from regulators and conformers, so actually broadly animals are classified into regulators and conformers. Now we can answer some why questions. I am putting across 3 why questions. The first why question is, why mammals are the most successful organisms on earth? First why, let's solve it. Why mammals? The very same reason. We were talking about mammals and birds having the ability for homeostasis. Because of this ability, they can thrive anywhere because they maintain a constant temperature, constant osmolarity. We can put them anywhere, whether it's a Sahara desert in the of South Africa, or we can put them in the Antarctica. They are not going to perish. They can survive because their body temperature and body osmolarity is constant. Second why. So we understood that of both the categories, which is better, which is most efficient, or which is the most sophisticated category? Is it ectotherms or endotherms? Endotherms. Definitely we find endotherms to be more efficient than ectotherms. So definitely during the course of evolution, which should get evolved? Endotherms should get evolved, or warm-blooded animals should have evolved, and the cold-blooded animals number will decrease and warm-blooded increases. Because evolution is selection of the best, survival of the fittest. The most modified version is being selected and they survive and generate new offsprings. So that should be the trend, because which is more efficient, the ones which are having the ability to for homeostasis is most efficient and than the one which is not having the ability for homeostasis. So definitely the number of ectotherms should increase or overpower the number of endotherms should increase the number of ectotherms, but it's just the opposite. So give the reason why. Nearly 99% of the animals, in spite of endotherm or homeostasis being an advantage, 99% are conformers. Only few come under Very few are coming, that is only the mammals and birds are coming under regulators. Now give the reason why. Only few organisms are regulators in spite of it being an efficient feature. So evolution should select this feature over that feature. But it is found that 99% are ectotherms or 99% are conformers, and only few percentage of organisms like the mammals and birds are endotherms or having the ability to for homeostasis. Why? In the course of evolution this should have been selected and this could have been discarded. Then why still we have this more, that is ectotherms more than endotherms? The reason is that, in simple words, it is an energetically expensive process. So what is an energetically expensive process? Regulation is an energetically expensive process. Especially thermoregulation is an energetically expensive process. Again, the analogy, we can give a comparison. Only the rich people can afford an AC, whereas those who are poor do not have money for AC, so they will bear up the heat and sweat it out. Similarly, vice versa, in the case of having a heater, only rich people can afford, so they can dish out money, and so it's very expensive to hire or to install a heater, and the other poor people just bear up with the cold. So there we see finance. Here it's just compared. For regulation of heat, it's compared to the gadgets, as I told you. To install such gadgets, we have to need a lot of finance. It is financially expensive. Here we talk in terms of energy. It is energetically expensive process. To generate heat, it is a very energetic, expensive process. And a third why. Third why is why small animals, mainly the shrew and hummingbird, are absent in the polar regions. They are not found in the polar regions. Why? Here you must remember the rule put forward by the scientist Allen's rule, which states that heat loss or heat gain is the function of the body surface area. Remember this rule put forward by Allen, and therefore it is called the Allen's rule. It states that heat loss or heat gain is the function of the body surface area. And so when we apply this in context to the hummingbird, we know the hummingbird is a very, very minute bird, very, very small bird. When we compare its surface area to the volume, which will be more? You just realize of a small bird covered with skin, you cut out the skin and spread it open and calculate the area and calculate the volume or measure its volume. Which will be more? The surface area or the volume? The surface area will be more than its volume. Therefore, tend to lose a lot of heat. And in order to maintain the heat, it has to undergo a lot of metabolism to generate heat through metabolism. And so it is an energetically expensive process, and therefore it is not found in the polar region. So better than being energetically expensive and using a lot of energy and metabolism to generate heat, is better not to be present in that particular region. This is the reason why these small animals, mainly the shrew and the hummingbird, which are very, very tiny, they have a surface area bigger, larger than their volume, because there are crevices, curves of the body. If you remove the skin, unfold it, it's more than its volume. So a lot of heat is generated through the surface area, and so to maintain that heat, they have to undergo a lot of metabolism, which is not possible to generate that heat. So it's an energetically expensive process, and this is the reason why these small animals are not found in the temperate regions or mainly in the polar regions. So I winded up the differences between conformers and regulators with the why question. The first why mammals are the successful organisms on the earth's surface, And according to the evolutionary biologists, they say that this is because of this ability, the ability for homeostasis. Second Y is, in spite of it endotherms being advantageous than ectotherms, the Y is the number of ectotherms, nearly 99%, or majority of the animals are conformers. Why? The answer is just in 3 words. It is an energetically expensive process what generates especially thermoregulation. And third Y is, why are small animals like the shrew and the hummingbird not present in the temperate or frigid or the polar regions? And you have to state the Allen's rule, which states that heat loss or heat gain is a function of the body surface. So here if we compare its body surface to its volume, it is found that the body surface is greater than its volume. So it tends to lose a lot of heat through its body surface, and to maintain that heat it has to undergo a lot of metabolism, which is very, very expensive. So it's better that they don't be present in these regions. So with that I wind up the 2 categories, the conformers and regulators. Now moving on to the other 2 strategies that was introduced earlier. The other 2 strategies are migration or suspension. This is opted only if the stressful condition is localized or is occurring for a short duration of time. So once again I reiterate, when do organisms migrate or when do the organism opt to suspend is only when that stressful condition exists in a very localized area. It's not widespread, only in a particular area, or when that particular stressful condition is only for a brief period of time, we go for this option. They either migrate or suspend. Now let's analyze migration. This picture itself depicts, and you are well aware of what is migration. It's usually the mass movement of animals, especially the birds, from a hostile area or the area where there is stress to a region which is most hospitable, and it's a temporary movement, after which they return to the original site, their homeland or their native place. So it's a temporary shift of these animals movement, and usually it's mass movement from the region where the stress to a more hospitable region, and after the stressful condition they return back. This is an example of Arctic tern which is depicting migration. We have the Siberian crane, many birds do migrate to just escape in time. They come back to their original place. Next option is suspend. Again suspend also if it is for a brief period of time. If that very hostile condition is for a brief period of time, say for example desiccation. So in that case, when it is very much, when there is dehydration, the bacteria and fungus, they produce thick walled spores. So the first category, there are 5 examples. The first category is bacteria and fungi. They produce spores, and these spores, the specialty is that they are covered by thick walls, so that even if the substratum is hostile, we know for the fungus to grow it should be warm and moist. So just imagine if the substratum is not conducive for the growth of the fungus, what will happen? It will tide over that because it's covered, the spores are covered with thick wall, it's not going to get damaged. It can cope with that stress, and on return of the favorable season it will germinate. A very good example, we have the bread, and we see molds formed on the bread. During which season it is very common? We know which season. The season where it's when the atmospheric temperature is warmer as well as the humidity in the atmosphere, we can see easily molds infest bread. Other seasons there are the spores in the air, but the thing is that they are remaining in a dormant condition. Only when the conditions are favorable they do germinate. Similarly, plants, second category, we have plants, they produce dormant seeds. We know seeds of Bengal gram, green gram, dal, etc. is put in your kitchen in tins. Do it germinate? No. But the very same seeds, if you give the necessary conditions like water, sunlight, etc., it will germinate. But once it is in the tin, it do not germinate. So they are dormant. Next category, the polar bear. To escape the cold, the severe cold, they just sleep during winter. So that process is called hibernation, and that in common terms it's called winter sleep. Similarly, summer sleep is found in snails and fish of the tropic regions. During the summer, when it is very warm, there's water stress, they just go to sleep, and that is called summer sleep or estivation. And we are in the last category, the microscopic forms, the zooplanktons of many lakes. They do not die off. You'll be wondering, the lakes are drying, so again from the scratch the zooplanktons, phytoplankton should start. No, the zooplanktons get into the stage called diapause, a stage of suspended growth. So whether the lake has dried up or it has become saline or too much of light, whatever is the situation, they tide or cope with that unfavorable condition by this process of suspension called diapause, which means a stage of suspended growth. So there are 5 examples to explain suspension. 1, bacteria producing thick walled spores. 2, plants producing dormant seeds. 3, polar bear undergoing winter sleep to escape the cold and severe winter. Then 4, snail and fishes of tropical regions going for a summer sleep to tide over the desiccation or the intense severe scorching heat. And zooplanktons undergoing diapause. So I hope you have understood how organisms cope to abiotic stress. Mainly there are 2 strategies, conformation and regulation. Besides that, we can either migrate or suspend. Migration and suspension, please give the clause. The clause is that when the stressful condition is only for a brief period of time or it is highly localized, only then they go for suspension or migration. So be very careful of the answer to the question. If the clause is given for a brief period of time or when the stressful condition is only localized, then the option is these 2 strategies which are depicted, suspend or migrate, or else it is broadly classified into conformers and regulators. Another name for regulators, simplest version name is warm-blooded, conformers cold-blooded. Again, in context to homeostasis, today what we learned is warm-blooded is also known as endotherms and cold-blooded is known as ectotherms. The basic differences: endotherms have the ability for homeostasis and ectotherms lacks this ability. I hope you have understood today's class on organisms, how they are exposed to abiotic stress and how do they cope to these abiotic stresses. Thank you.